Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. It's because of you that JLF is a success. Today we have with us Ruchir and Rahul, who both written wonderful books. They have, I think it's great that we have the copies on the desk as well. I'm going to talk very, very briefly about the books just to give the audience a sense. So Rahul's book kind of captures the life of a woman over 3 decades. And it's from the 60s to the 90s, essentially. And I think what's fascinating is that in the end, she becomes a railway clerk. And she's a woman railway clerk in this sort of fictional town. And Richard's book is set in Calcutta. And it's Calcutta during the Second World War. And again, it's a different atmosphere. And I think what's incredible about both these books is that it tells about India's social and political histories through very vivid characters. We're going to be talking about the characters through this session, and also maybe we'll just start with asking them, you both have written 2 great novels. Do you think you've written great Indian novels?
Okay, so Rahul and I were talking about this. I think the idea of the great novel comes from the great American novel, which is this concept floated either by Hemingway or about Hemingway or something, and then each famous American writer has attempted usually his, the women haven't done it so deliberately, their attempt, whether it's Roth or Bellow or, various people have attempted this great American novel. And then we get Shashi Tharoor, tongue-in-cheek, writing the great Indian novel, 20, 30 years ago. So one can take it with a pinch of salt, the idea of a great novel. I think I love Rahul's book. I've read more than half of it right now. He's struggled through, half of mine, I think. I think it's a great book. It's half the size of mine. My book, I hope, is a very readable book despite its size. The size is not meant to proclaim greatness. You can have a very slim volume, something by, James Baldwin or something, Giovanni's Room, which could be regarded as a great American novel if you wanted to look at it that way. So, yes, I hope the novel is regarded as a good book and as a very, book that people go back to from time to time. The word great, except in my book where it comes as a title, I'm kind of wary of it.
Yeah, and well, thanks everyone for coming, and good afternoon to all of you. The great Indian novel, what is it that this is not like an Olympic sport, but if you were to assign points, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the G, the greatness of it? Are you looking at the I, the Indianness of the novel? Or, well, indeed, the novelty of the novel? Like, what is it how do you even start thinking about these things? Is it possible that a great Indian novel actually doesn't have any time spent in India at all, but could be set in a small island in the Caribbean, for example, with A House for Mr. Biswas, which is basically a Ghar Jamai novel, and Ghar Jamai rebelling against his dependency? Could a Hindi novel set entirely in a small North Indian village, as Rag Darbari is, be a great Indian novel because it does get to something essential about the Indian mind? Could a Bengali novel set entirely in a Bengali village, though I'm thinking of Pother Panchali here, though it does venture out into Kashi.
Putulna Te Riti Kotha is more contemporary.
But it catches something essential about the emotion, the mental makeup of Indians, despite being, to me, it's not the architecture of the novel so much as the emotional distillation of what that writing tells you about this society, about the people it's set amid, that when you look at it, you're kind of roused by the recognition of, yes, this is it. This is us. This language is us. These ways of thinking are us. These people interacting with each other in this way, all the friction, the energies that come out of that on the page, this is us. And I think there are like a million ways of doing that.
You mentioned A House for Mr. Biswas, and I think it's very early in your novel you have this line about a bend in the river. Were you referring to Naipaul, or was that just a...
Funnily enough, I was actually referring to a man who looms large over Ruchir's novel, which is Robi Thakur, Rabindranath Tagore, because that's actually a Bangla children's verse, Amar Choto Nodi Chole Ake Bakya, which is basically a curving river. It's one of the Bangla poems kids learn quite early. So the nod there was not actually to Naipaul, but to Rabindranath Tagore's. And actually, to children and the idea of how language comes to the children. And yeah.
Since you mentioned Rabindranath Tagore, then I think we must go to Richard's book because there's a great scene about Rabindranath Tagore has just died, and your novel, I mean, that's a very pivotal moment in the novel. So can we talk about why you chose that, and what were some of the challenges of creating a scene like that today in fiction?
Well, I was always very interested in Calcutta as in the Second World War, and the kind of different characters I'd heard tell of from the people who'd lived through that time, including my father. And my father was a Gujarati writer, well known in Gujarati, and he actually has a book where his main protagonist, a Gujarati man like himself, goes to the funeral, and it's a very different description of the funeral. But he told me about it, and I knew that he had had that. So I then read Tapan Rai Chaudhary's recounting of it. I then read that Satyajit Ray went as a young man and got his pocket picked. And there were other descriptions about Tagore's funeral for different people. It was like this big elephant where, where were you when Kennedy was shot? Where were you on the day Tagore died in Bengal? So I thought it was a great point to start because also Tagore's death was almost like if not the final nail, a kind of a big rupture. It was like a signal that the Bengal Renaissance and a certain kind of Bengali sensibility officially accepted by Bengalis was over or getting done. And right around that time already, the kind of great cruelty, the great brutality that Bengalis would show to each other and people would show to Bengalis, the British and others, that those things were already, coming shortly after. A very different Bengal was emerging and was going to really show its face over the next 5, 7, 10 years through the Great Bengal killing, the famine and partition. So it was a hinge moment for me in Bengali cultural history, and it was a great time to catch these 4 characters of mine who didn't know each other, very different class, all of them, in the funeral, and follow them through their experience, their respective experiences of the funeral. That's where the novel starts.
May I add something about here?
Sorry.
Sorry, just about, because we're talking about the great X novel, American, whatever. And I was telling Ruchir that it reminded me, the way he does Tagore's death is so great. And it reminded me, he can't be accused of inspiration because he hasn't read Underworld by Don DeLillo, because that takes a very important cultural moment in the city. This is the big baseball match with featured the shot that was heard around the world, which is like the opening 70s. It's like a bravura section at the start of Underworld. And from that cultural moment, he picks up characters who were involved with it in some way and then follows their lives. So it's already connecting through this architecture the lives of, the quotidian lives of various people caught in this moment in history, which with a great national moment, if Bengal will release Tagore from themselves and allow him to be shared by the nation, a national moment.
Yeah.
You mentioned cultural moments, and I think maybe we can just expand on that. So, for example, in Railsong, the census is a big thing, right? And the census kind of, it's fascinating how I think the opening line is, "I want to count people," right? And that's what this little girl is telling her father, and he says, "Count buffaloes." And then I think you also have the railways. That's a common theme to both your books. It's and how the railways kind of unites the country, but it's much more than that as well. It's also, it can be a sloppy mechanism, and it's also not the most well-run, it's not the most efficient. So can we just talk about these cultural moments and these sort of larger themes that both the novels cover?
Let me just say a little bit about the novel. The protagonist is a girl who we follow from the age of 3 till her mid-30s. And it does start with the line, "I want to count people." They're on their way to a railway township. The idea of counting people is basically what the census literally is. It's a count of people. But when you think about, if I was just to play with that sentence, and think about it as "I want people to count," that becomes a more novelistic idea. In a country like India, where we have endless a variety of types of people, what does it mean for one type to be interacting with another? Uh, are you, as a person, a sum of your parameters? What does it then equally mean for you as an individual to be responding to an unparalleled number of individuals as India has? In a sense, it is the idea of how one lives among others. So the motif of the census carries this through in various ways. Her relationship with the census develops in different ways. So in that sense, some of the framing of the novel is national through the metaphor of the Indian railways, where what happens when we travel by train? We are basically taking some part of ourselves, our languages, our cultures, our gods and goddesses, all of that. That is
Our food.
our food. We are kind of, that's playing up, rubbing up against other kinds of food, languages, etc., in the close, intimate space of a railway coach. And then it's going out in the country in different ways. In a sense, it's a process of Indians becoming one another. So this idea was central to the story. But through it, I felt I could also write about these bigger ideas of India through the character in an intimate way. Because these are questions which actually affect us at a pretty personal level as well. Who are you in relation to others?
The question of who are you in relation to others, I think, ties in very well with Richard's book, because you have these four main characters, like you mentioned, right? So there's Imogen, there's Kedar, there's Gopal, and there's Nirupama. So maybe we can talk a little bit about these diverse characters and how they kind of affect each other and influence each other.
So I'll digress a little bit because it's a good railway analogy. I made a film called 11 Miles about 35 years ago now. It's about the Bauls, who are these folk musicians in Bengal. And they have a lot of analogies around trains, right, in their songs. Trains, bicycles, torchlights. And this crazy Baul, who was one of the main characters in the film, Jogi will remember him, I see Jogi back there, Gaur said, and the film begins with that quote, that it's like we are all in different crisscrossing trains, going in different directions, but at the moment all our compartments have lodged into this one, where we are all in the same compartment, but we're all in different trains heading in different directions. So it's a fantastic analogy, and I kind of wish I'd without even before your book or anything, I kind of wish I'd used that in my novel, because my novel, Calcutta, is that compartment, really, in which different people are passing through in different directions. So there is Kedar, who's a wealthy Brahmo, son of a barrister and a landowner, Jomidar, who has ambitions to be a painter and an artist, who leads a good life. He plays tennis, he drives a sports car, he reads books, he paints, and he's really a Rasik, but he has the money and the thing to be a Rasik. You know, he's completely in his bubble. Also hobnobs with the Westerners, with the Europeans and all. There is Imogen, who is come away from London, traumatized by the Blitz, and she's living with her parents. Her father is a big official in the Raj administration in Calcutta, and her mother is a typical high administrator official's Raj wife. And she is rebellious and wants to get away from this and is exploring the city and trying to find out what it's about. There is Nirupama, who for me directly connects to Charulata. These are two big classic Bengali names, by the way, Charu and Niru, in other literature and in films, as we know, just by accident. So Nirupama is an ancestress of Charu in a sense, in a very different way. She's from a Bengali middle-class family. Her father is a set designer, stage designer. Her mother is a school teacher. And she has studied history in Scottish Church in Calcutta, and she's secretly volunteering for the Communist parties. A lot of young people, idealistic people in those days did. They joined the CPI, which was underground, banned at the time. And she she gets into a commune with two other school friends of hers, one who's a Congress worker and one who's a sort of Hindu Mahasabha type. And the three are school friends with three different political beliefs who form a women's commune. And this kind of stuff did actually happen in Calcutta. And her graph as a young woman with leftist ideals, what happens to her, is one of the main spines of the book. And finally, there is Gopal, who is a petty criminal, a pickpocket. And on the day Tagore dies is his last day as a pickpocket, because by that evening, his gang boss will promote him into much more serious crime. And he will never return to pickpocketing and minor crime from that so-called promotion. So these are the four people from very different class backgrounds and very different trajectories, whose lives then, like with the railways, but also like a city can do, their lives crisscross, bump into each other, cut across each other. And that's the character story, the story of the novel in that sense. Again, people who are unlike yourselves, who you have to deal with because of the historical situation or because you're in the city in turmoil.
It's so interesting hearing the both of you talk, because I think Ruchir keeps following into he makes so many cinema references, and Rahul keeps talking about sports. He has sports references, and I think both of you have written about it. Ruchir has also been a filmmaker in the past. So going back to the great Indian novel, do you think that I'm just curious, do you think your sports interest influences this book, and do you think your film interest influences The Great Eastern Hotel?
I don't think there's actually much sport in Railsong. There's maybe one cricket reference, or maybe two, and it's a pretty obscure one. No, I feel... when I think of Sly Company, my previous novel, that was so much written out of the music of the Caribbean. Over here, no. I'm thinking about other ideas of pop culture would have seeped into the novel. Film songs, certainly. A little bit of classical music, Hindustani. A lot of it is just at the level of language, how people speak. Yeah. Ruchir?
I think I probably have more cricket references in my book. Both the novels that I've written, I've written about cricket as well, not as brilliantly as Rahul, but quite enthusiastically in the past. And I used to love cricket. Not the current thing we are watching, which pretends to be cricket. And both novels I forbade myself to bring in too much cricket, because it's such a favorite thing of mine. But in this novel, there are a lot of people saying, oh, he doesn't know where his off stump is, or I hope we are actually playing a test match and not a tennis match. And these kind of sporting references and things which Bengalis and westernized Indians and the British always did make a lot in those days. So
I have a lot of Amitabh in the film.
You have a lot of Amitabh. You have a lot of Bachchan.
And some Hema Malini. I have Sita and Geeta, Amar Akbar Anthony.
Yes.
Those things.
You got that stuff. Yeah. With me,
I have Sakharam Binder as well.
Yes.
Any Vijay
weirdly, actually, direct cinema, you probably have more than I do. I mean, people tell me that the book is written cinematically. Yes, it is. And there are some couple of direct cinema references, especially when this young couple, Kedar, he meets an Eastern European woman called Eva, and they enter Great Eastern for the first time. There is a lot of cinema reference in the way they come in. It's a short breakdown, and with jazz music playing in the background. But my references are again more to do with Indian classical music, jazz, and popular music of the time.
I have Salil Chaudhary, if any Salil Chaudhary fans are here. And I feel like Ray's fingerprints are also on this novel. There is, of course, central to this is a working woman, Charu. She becomes a railway employee, first as a clerk and then as a welfare inspector. She does field work, goes into all parts of the country, following very, very interesting cases. And so that made me think of course, Mahanagar and Aruti, who is Satyajit Ray's great film adapted from Narendra Mitra's great short story. There is Charulata, the name itself, though I didn't think of that Charulata when I named her Charu. There is famine. There's Oshani Shonket. There is, I'm sure there are more. Yeah, now that you mention it.
I've tried very hard to keep Ray's fingerprints off my novel. There are two very direct references.
Why did you try hard to do that? Why did you want to not have his fingerprints on the novel?
Because sometimes when you have too much of one dish, you don't want to taste it anymore. And I think we've become too Rayized, if you like, in Bengal. And there needs to some some balancing tastes need to happen. Ray gets pickpocketed and Kedar gets pickpocketed in my, so that's one direct
That's
reference
very
to Ray.
meta, Ruchir.
And then later on, somebody's talking about the issue of Marg in the book. And they said that they've talked about all these young artists and stuff like this, but they haven't mentioned Kedar. He's upset about that. But he says that they've even mentioned this fellow, Ray, the tall chap who makes films. So there's a second reference to Ray there. But other than that, I've tried to find a Bengal that Ray doesn't really touch upon in his films. And maybe my Bengal is more connected, but again, not that much either, to the films of Ritwik Ghatak, who's the anti-Ray, if you like, or the counterbalance to Ray. There's also people would find references to Mrinal Sen because there's a lot of reference to the Tebaga movement, the communist movement, armed revolution, etc., etc. So Ray, and in my cinematic descriptions and stuff, my cinema style or my imagining of the book is very different from Ray's short breakdowns and short takings. So, but I did recognize Mahanagar, and I thought, yeah, I could see in a good way Ray all across your book.
I want to talk a little bit about the setting. So, of course,
About what, sorry?
the settings. So the Great Eastern Hotel is in Calcutta, and Railsong is in this fictional town initially, and then it moves to Bombay. There's a description which is from Ruchir's book, which I just want to read out, and we'll talk about that. I read somewhere that Louis Kahn has said that you really see a building and the architect's essential intentions once the building becomes a ruin. His point, I suppose, was that a live structure offers too much confusion, too many curtains of activity, that current reality provides too many obfuscations for one to be able to see the buildingness of a building properly. So can we talk a little bit about why a ruin attracts you?
Well, if you come from Bengal, and Provashi Bengalis are different, essentially, Bombay isn't like that, okay? If you come from Bengal, if you come from Calcutta, you are living in a constant state of decay.
A poetic decay.
Poetic or sometimes very, very grim and non-poetic decay. But that decay is everywhere. And that decay kind of seeps into your mentality, into your zen, into your writing, into the way you walk on the streets. And you have to fight that, right? At the same time, it is poetic. At the same time, it can be quite exhilarating or very moving as well in a non-sentimental way. When you look at the layers and layers and layers of history. Somebody once told me Calcutta is the graveyard of all kinds of different capitalism that have ever existed. And it's like somewhere up to recently, I suppose it's true. I don't know about the digital capitalism, but the new things. But so for me, that architecture of the hotel or the architecture of those decaying buildings, if you transport that to the idea of history as a building, or that moment in history as a building, and you can actually see the innards of that building when it's decayed and fallen, and you can get a shape that a live building cannot give you. That if you're living in a period, you can't really see it in a certain kind of, with a certain kind of clarity. But looking back at it, you can. I mean, here I'll quickly make a point. I think it's very interesting that I'm born in 1960, and I'm writing about a period from 1940 to 1943, and then from the 1970s, looking back at 1940 to 1950. That's the structure of the book. So these are the years that are being really looked at are just before I was born, so I never experienced that time. And yet I was very fascinated by it. Rahul, who's 10 years younger than me, or a bit more, writes about the time when I was born in the 1960s. Charu and I are about the same age, right? So he's writing about a certain India that I can feel when I read his book, but he has imagined it and researched it and brought it to life. But again, it's from before your time.
It is.
Just before your time, not from a long time before, but just preceding your birth kind of thing, which is, I find that parallel quite interesting.
Why does that happen? Why do you choose periods that you haven't experienced? As a novelist, is that where the challenge lies?
You go.
Good question. So, when I started writing Railsong, I didn't have Charu, I didn't have the time period or any of that. I just thought how interesting it would be to place an individual in the middle of a vast enterprise that evokes and suggests the complexity and the vastness of this country, and how to see and put an ordinary person in the middle of that. I mean, it's an idea which could be taken in any kind of direction. It's almost a satirical idea. And some of my first attempts were, in fact, kind of comic, of somebody going around doing like a personal census. And then I thought I really have to know the person who is going to be put over there. And then I started to discover her. And I thought I want to start at her start. And instinctively, I put her, I don't know why, Ruchir, but yeah, so I'm 79 born, she's 58 born, 20 years before.
79 born, you're even younger than I thought you were.
So 20, about 2 decades.
2 decades, yeah, decades before your time. Yeah, same.
Before my time. Funnily enough, I moved to Bombay myself from Sikandrabad in 1988, whereas Charu's life, the novel ends in 1992. So it's almost as I was challenging myself to not write about the times I've lived through. Maybe there's something in the novelist that seeks to connect what has happened to what is now. And so that when you're thinking about your times and the circumstances around you, you're seeking answers, you're drawing back the line to a period just before you in order to be able to discover it for yourself. 1970s Bombay, for instance, I didn't live it, I wasn't born. I spoke about it a lot to my mother, who's like Bombay born and bred Gujarati. That's another thing Ruchir and I have common, is like, I'm Bengali Gujarati mixed, he's the honorary Bengali Gujarati in Kolkata.
Gujarati mix, yeah, so we can both speak to each other.
Yeah, we speak in 4 languages.
Yeah.
We like Bangarati, English, Delhi Hindi, that's like part of... actually the part of the fun of reading each other's novels as well, because...
Talking about reading, shall we quickly do the readings, because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, okay. Is my answer finished? I forget. Where was that?
Finish and let's do the reading.
What was the yeah, why did I start where I started? Maybe to draw those connections, to work out for ourselves what our present is. Possibly.
Yeah, same. I mean, that period has so many seeds of our time today. All kinds of atomizations, communal violence against people, there are different ideas of what the country should be. I mean, when my novel begins, Pakistan is a joke. It's a gambit that Jinnah is playing. No one believes it's going to happen. It's like a stupid idea. And suddenly it crystallizes, across the book. And other things, famine, who gets to eat what in this country of great inequality right now, etc.
Same with just like a movement like the Ram Mandir movement. When it's starting, you don't know where this is going. You don't know how definitive, how big it's going to be. And slowly it starts creeping up on you. And then it takes over family discussions in the domestic space, the battles for caste equality. If you're a government servant in the 1980s and VP Singh is in power and the SC/ST Act is coming into being, this becomes a part of your everyday lived experience. It's not just something that you read in the newspapers. And where are these things going? They're kind of coming to the surface, and they take on a life of their own, and which is even bigger than you might think while you're living through it.
Before we go into the readings, you mentioned Bangrati. That's Bengali Gujarati.
Yeah, I mean, we literally
he's actually a Desai, okay? Just know this, he's a closet Desai. So
I'm actually a Mehta Desai mix. I mean, if you really want to get technical.
He's a Mehta Desai, then I'm also a Mehta, so we may be related even.
My children, God, maybe this is getting too personal, but my wife is Assamese, so my children are actually quarter Bengali. They have like Assamese.
No,
Gujarati,
but this is
Bengali.
great because I think all these different identities makes the language of the novel, right? And I think I want to talk about the language of the novels. There is an Indian English, but that I think is also too glib a term. But can we talk a little bit about how you have created the voices, how you've created the prose, let's say, and the voices and the.
So I want to say, and I'm a little wary of saying it with Vivek Shanbag here in the audience, but Vivek, I'm going to take the liberty of making the claim that I think of Railsong as something of a multilingual novel in English. And the reason I say that is very little of the lived life of this novel is actually among the English speakers. A lot of the first part of the novel is in a Bengali world of the the quarters, and of a kind of Hindustani-speaking world of the railway colony outside. A lot of the later Charu's working life in Bombay is in the Bombay Argat Bambaiya. There's a lot of Marathi in the workplace. The English that comes into the novel is often English for whom it's not the first language. There is governmental English. When she speaks out into different parts of the country for her cases, she goes to the Badlands of UP. She goes into the Deccan. So there is kind of Dakhni. There is UP. I mean, there's a lot of section is set in the Gujarati-speaking world of Bombay. Now, how do you the challenge of rendering that English is a difficult one. It's a technical challenge. It's not like film where you can have people just talk in different language and run subtitles.
Yeah.
How do you do it without kind of subtitling yourself? How do you do it integrated in a way that kind of it syncs from the medium, which is English, and gives you a sense of the river of languages that India is. I don't know whether I've been successful, but this is very much my effort. And it is also, to me, almost like an ethical choice that you don't want to circumscribe the world of your novel because, I'm sorry, I'm suddenly very much louder, but because of the medium you're operating in. I don't want to look at that as a limitation. I want to see whether I can use that as a kind of facilitator to give us a sense of Indian life.
Richard, do you see your novel as a multilingual
Yeah, well, so
English
I'll
novel?
start with a little story here. I wrote my first novel, Last Jet Engine Laugh, also available here for those who are interested, has different languages, Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, English, French, a little bit. But there I've often put in Roman, someone speaking in Gujarati or Bengali and then translated or given the meaning of it paragraph later or pages later. And this Australian woman who was doing the moderation for me in Adelaide, who read the book through very thoroughly, had great questions, starts off by saying, Ruchir's written a great book, I just wish she'd written it in English. And I went back and looked at my book, which was 374 pages long, and I totaled up all the different non-English bits in the book, and they did not total more than 4 pages. But I thought 4 pages, like Indian spices or strong colors, has managed to spice up the whole book so that it feels like it's not written in English.
Yeah, there's
right?
something like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's like I realized at a very strange time it was made the book more difficult for non-Indians to read. I did translate Gujarati for the Bengalis, Bengali for the Gujaratis and South Indians, etc., etc. But this time around, when I came, my canvas was smaller in the sense I had Bengali, English, and different registers of English. So I had to render Bengali in English.
And different dialects. And
different dialects of
Bengali,
Bangla, yeah. And also different characters, the way they speak. And then the way how an English person, a man speaks, how a woman speaks, how an American speaks, how a black American speaks.
A Latvian.
How a Latvian speaks, as Eastern European, exactly. And Biharis abusing Ma Behan Ki Galia, but in English, that kind of stuff. So I decided to translate almost immediately. Right after putting in something in Hindi or Bangla, I would translate immediately. But again, I think what you and I both do, Rahul, if you allow me, is that we both write in Indian English. And it's not Indian English of the kind of Peter Sellers joke Indian English, but there is a different kind of language that's developing when we write in English very fluently with great suppleness and beauty, in your case, if I may say so. But with the confidence of not having the cadences of an American or an Australian or an English person. It's a very, very, and nor is it a Southeast Asian or a Singaporean English, right? Or an African English, or Caribbean English. It's a very much a cosmopolitan, if you like, city, urban Indian English, which serves us in different ways that we want, and sometimes becomes a block for me, in my case, as to how the book is received abroad as well. I feel it sometimes that, okay, when I read somebody else's book, which I think is a lesser book, getting a lot more attention, and I have that typical writer's envy and resentment, and I look at their writing and I think, oh, okay, the paragraph that she or he has described and how they've done it and how I've done it is very different. So that, I think, again, is a moral choice. Yeah. It's also a career choice, maybe, I don't know.
There is an exhilaration, especially to the mixing of languages I think because perhaps to do with our own cultural background, which we do find exciting.
Also, we
And
think
which-
English is an
and-
Indian language. We don't need to be ashamed of it,
Yeah. And I mean, the Sly Company of People Who Care, my previous novel was set in Guyana. And so that uses what they call Creolese, the Guyanese patois. And when I wrote the first draft of that, Shruti Devi, my editor, her response was a little bit, I mean, not in those words, but like, you have to write
What
a
the hell
little
is
more
this?
English.
Yeah.
Because that language was bouncing about my head so much. And I felt I must have fidelity to it. So you also have to, but rein yourself in a little bit. You have to then find, not just reproduce, but kind of integrate, kind of make your own language.
Transliterate almost, as P. Lal would have said.
And your anecdote about the Adelaide person and you totting up those pages, that reminded me when the audiobook was being done for Railsong. It's read by a British Indian. And I told my publisher, Paul Bagley is here, and I said that I know there are a fair number of Indian words in various languages, and I'll be happy to help them through that.
Couldn't you have got an Indian person to do it?
She is. I mean, she is in it. I haven't read it because I don't want to face my own words and things. But she's done a beautiful job. People tell me. But so it was meant to be one half-an-hour conversation, Zoom call to go through all the Indian words, and it became 3 calls of almost 2 hours each. And we could get only through so many pages at a time because that's when it kind of struck me, like how. In terms of language and other references, just how Indian this thing might be.
Right.
How foreign it might be to others.
Since we're talking about language, I think we should go into a reading.
Rahul, go. Read first and then.
I think we're doing some railway-themed thing, right? Context, I'm doing a railway arrival. He's going to do a railway exodus. 2 great stations, terminuses, cities of India, Bombay and Kolkata. And this is the teenage Charulata, who's run away from her township across the country. She's made this epic train journey at the time of the Great Railway Strike of 1974. So everything is in disorder. Trains are even more triple, quadruple, etc., packed from normal, etc. People are being shoved in through the windows In those days, bars, the grills across the windows weren't a common thing. You could pay porters to, 50p, just shove me in, etc. It's that kind of journey, and this is just towards the end of the journey. Through the inky heart of 1974, the caterpillar crawled on. In the perspirational morning, a man who had yesterday been a few compartments down the corridor held court in her aisle. The mood felt fantastically different. He shushed everybody to calculate the speed from the frequency of clicks on the track and announced the result. Once you take into account other stoppages, at the current rate, we will reach in another 6.5 days. Ha 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 ha. People laughed with abandon. Some had been on the train for over 70 hours. Maybe the journey was indeed coming to an end. Tropicality steamed in through the windows, the feeling of coast, then the commute-stricken conurbations, then more and more and more of everything. One stop they made in the anarchy of a city station. As the city injected itself into her bloodstream, she felt knocked out. Sound clouds, people swarms like she had never heard or seen. No next step could be devised in the face of an arbitrariness so large. She felt slayed by the gigantry of her folly. The stunned rake inched into the terminus. The thousands of inhabitants emptied out like a plagued village. Migrants, runaways, their boxes, bedding rolls, slippers, infants, ambitions, compulsions, pouring out onto the platform underneath a tremendous roof of steel and light. Whereupon they resumed on foot like an ancient caravan. At the concourse, the caravan was fissioned into infinity by countless commuters. These vigorous city commuters were kineticized by a hissing in-breath, out-breath that appeared to be a form of commuting release. Now she was distracted by a different nature of mouth sounds, pucker lip, and close-toothed ones that went ch-ch or tz. She realized they were meant for her to move aside. She did, on unsteady legs folded too long. Drawn into successively parallel streams of human movement, she strayed into an area built like a cathedral. Marvelous pillars, marvelous golden stars above, but here were mere ticket counters. Above them, stained glass. Behind them, the water containers, sleek modern cylinders, not plump clay pots. She was at the exit, edging past the threshold of inside and outside in the heat of her unbelievable folly, under pigeons hustling and hurrying as though themselves late for a next train. One alighted on a beastly projection in the facade and emptied itself on her head. Vandana, it is good luck, a man said, brushing past her, without glancing at her, and pointillated away into the crowd. She shifted out of the stream. So many women, smokeresses, workers, idlers, women who looked like machines, like mannequins, like ragamuffins, groups of marching women beating rolling pins on steel plates, demanding the end of price rise. Wiping the pigeon shit with her mother's monogrammed handkerchief that has served her well over the past 2 days, exhaling a deep breath that collapsed in a puddle on her toes, determined to make inquiries at the stop where the decked red buses wheezed and resumed with great asthmatic roars. Into the city of Bombay stepped Miss Chitol.
Thank you, Rahul.
So I had the good luck of finishing my book first and then being able to read Rahul's and looking at all the parallels. For example, we both have Kejriwal's Marwadi characters. We have, he's got a lot more railway than I do. Not Kejriwal, sorry, Junjunwala, you're right. Of course, what was I thinking? Junjunwala. And various other things but the great thing that's there is the kind of overlaps and the kind of differences. It's very different books, but they look at Indian history almost like a sort of like a different kind of diptych forms between the two of them. Say if there were different painting styles, but talking about a continuation of a certain kind of very different view of India, but one which is the two would recognize each other, I feel. And one of the things that's there is the great railway stations. He's talking about VT, now called Shivaji Chhatrapati Shivaji's terminus, but we'll always be, in my head, will always be Victoria Terminus VT. And this is about Howrah Station in January 1940.
Still called Howrah.
It's still called Howrah. No, it's called Netaji. No, the airport is Netaji Subha. This is still called Howrah. They haven't changed the name yet. Basically, what happens is the Japanese attack Malaya right the day after they attack Pearl Harbor, and they suddenly start sweeping southwards towards Singapore, and at the same time northwards through Thailand into Burma. And Calcutta's population panics. And the first great exodus that happens is in early January, late December, early January, where all kinds of people think the Japanese are coming, they're going to bomb Calcutta, and they're trying to get out, those who can, right? Then they come back later, and then the Japanese bombs actually do fall, and then there's another exodus. But this is a story about, this is a description of the first exodus. And Kedar, our character, is going to deliver some pastries and cheese puffs from Great Eastern Hotel to his girlfriend, who's secretly his girlfriend, who's a smokeress. And he's making his way through the perspirational morning, but it's less perspirational because it's winter. And he's carrying this packet and he's entering Howrah Station. So it's as if he's sprinted into a sea. His panic mounting, the smell of engine smoke in his nose, Kedar works his way towards the platforms, sometimes having to go at right angles to the direction he needs, and once or twice even backwards before another narrow pathway reveals itself. All around him, the cavernous space echoes with sounds, trains releasing steam and warning whistles, the garble of constant announcements on the loudspeakers, car horns rejoining now, the shrill whistles of traffic policemen, voices shouting in panic or fury, all enmeshed in the constant hubbub of thousands of people, all of it bouncing off the high roofs and skylights from which the midday sunlight falls straight down into this noisy cathedral of soot. Kedar takes in all this as he tries to find a route to the platforms. As he moves forward, he finds himself stepping on corners of straw mats that families have spread to mark out their temporary dwellings, each group with his entire universe clutched close. Pushing through, he trips over cloth sacks, bedrolls, trunks, and bamboo tarazu cages holding squawking poultry. people carrying their entire kitchens with them, several sacks with protruding iron. The Khomta's women used to stir food in pots, some even holding onto their bucket ovens turbaned with dried clay. His feet sliding on stray bits of guava and banana and God knows what human fluids, the floor shifting under his shoes as if some devil is offering an easy welcome into a one-way underworld. His legs shaking with the extended effort of stepping carefully while trying to move fast, he finally reaches the platforms. An announcement peels itself away from the unclear repetition in 3 languages. Delayed departure, 16 down, Patna Express will now leave platform 11 at 1 p.m., delayed departure. The Patna Express will now depart at 1 p.m. Still holding the brown paper bag in a tight embrace, Kedar locates the large clock suspended from the roof of platform 7. 40 minutes past noon. He would have been 10 minutes too late had the train left on time. On the platforms, a bit of space opens up. Space people use as they pelt past him, running for their trains, their faces screwed up with fear as if the Japanese were already at Jaipur. I'll stop here, actually. Yeah, this is a good place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruchir. I think we're just out of time. We have time for questions? Yeah. Questions, let's have your hands and we'll get a mic to you.
Oh, please extend a little bit, boss. Come on. You've come all the way from, a few minutes. Yeah,
Sorry,
2 or 3
the
questions
lady
we'll
in
take.
white.
Come on, please.
Hi, thank you for such a wonderful talk. My question's for Rahul, and I read Railsong twice. I loved it so much. And I thought the temporal axis of the railways, the census and the elections works so well. My question is mostly about your research, and I'm curious about what your process looked like from the time you were like, okay, I'm going to get the details right to the T, where you have characters saying dialogue which is like, hey, hey, ha, ha, keeps on repeating in clerical conversations. So I'm curious about what your research looked like, because you have experts from booklets, you have designations of railway clerks and how the entire hierarchy works, and the kind of cases that come in and how much of it is borrowed from your research and how much of it is imagined cases.
So, I mean, in that sense, that part of it was almost Stanislavskian method writing. Immerse yourself into the world of the character. I just didn't want to get things wrong. It would stain my idea of what I was trying to do. And especially if I am trying to animate, I was trying to make drama inside the house. I want to make sure the house is right. All the other details are correct. So I became a little obsessed with that. I picked lots of railway brains. I read all kinds of interminable establishment volumes, circulars, etc. Not all those details were available in circulars, especially the kind of detail the novelist looks for. So then I had to find people to tell me about those times. Once I felt I had secure enough, that I know enough of the basic thing, then of pay scales, grades, designations, all of that, then I felt my imagination could soar off a secure platform. I wasn't bullshitting then. I could actually imagine with confidence.
The moment I began research on this novel, I realized I'd made a huge mistake, and it's one I will never make again. I'd chosen a historical period which was the most fecund, most turbulent, most crazy period of Calcutta's history. So I'm still finding out new things about what happened then. Someone's coming up to me saying, do you know, your book is very good, but you missed out on this. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I mean, so these new facts, and I realized it's like walking into a sweet mega store, and you want to eat everything, like a multi-cuisine, like a buffet, massive, outsize, obscenely large buffet. You want to eat every dish, and you can't stuff everything into your book. So a lot of time went into painfully not killing my darlings, but jettisoning my darlings from the book, because there's a. Okay, no, so I'm just saying that the research for this book was very tricky, and one of the challenges was to edit the research as I was going and doing the book. I could go on about the research for a long time. One more question? Yes? No, sorry. Then let me just finish this properly. So I would advise anyone who is taking on a historic period, try and take a period, unlike Rahul and me, where not that much happens. It'll be better for the story writing.
Such a time doesn't exist, Ruchir.
I know it doesn't, because the moment you get into any period, you're in trouble, right? Any historic period.
Well, we are happy to talk wherever we are meant
Well,
to
anyway,
go
thanks
next
for that. We
with
can
more
take
of
other
the readers.
questions outside. Sorry about the
Can we have a
extra
big round
delay.
of applause for our panelists on stage? It was a fantastic session.